Although pistols have a minimal effect on conflict outcomes, they are among the most fascinating aspects of a military's arsenal. They offer a unique window into military design trends, popular thinking of the time, and the overall doctrine of a given armed force. For example, the C-96 and the Parabellum 08 reflected Germany's approach of mechanically complex, elegant yet expensive, iconic designs. Meanwhile, eccentric, unreliable Japanese handguns reflected that country's isolationist positions and its military thinkers' belief in the unimportance of sidearms. However, Russia took a very different approach, which was emblematic of its military doctrine. Soviet designs were influenced by field experience on the savage battlefields of the Eastern Front, and as such, they were robust, hard-hitting, and simple to create. And no other handgun better typifies this than the Soviet TT-33. But before we get into the pistol's history and development, let's take a quick look at its features. You'll notice some of the footage in this video is from the World War II combined arms game Enlisted. It's a first-person shooter where players can take control of individual soldiers, aircraft, and tanks. I'm using this video to try to educate players on both history and firearms in a way that is more engaging than a relatively dry Forgotten Weapons or See an Arsenal video. Now, both of these channels make great content, but might not appeal to younger generations. This is my attempt to bridge that gap and bring younger people into the fold. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. For the uninitiated, the TT-33 is a single-action-only, hammer-fired, locked-breech, magazine-fed, semi-automatic handgun chambered in 7.62 by 25mm. It feeds from an 8-round single-stack magazine and locks open on empty. With the exception of the grips, the entire pistol is made of steel. But despite this, it only weighs in at about 2 pounds. And this might seem overly heavy by modern standards, but it's roughly 25% lighter than the 1911. And this weight also has the advantage of taming the recoil of the blasty 7.62 25 Tokarev round. But before I get into the performance, handling, and ergonomics, let's look at how the Soviets came to adopt this very Browning-influenced design. Development. The TT-33 didn't just materialize out of thin air. It resulted from years of development by famed Soviet firearms designer Fedor Tokarev. Tokarev's original design, the TT-30, was submitted to the 1930 Soviet Pistol Design Contest organized by the Soviet Revolutionary Military Council. This contest aimed to replace the Handgun 1895 revolver that was then in service with the Soviet military. The design contest had 9 core requirements that each gun had to meet in order to be considered eligible. 1. It had to be chambered in the new 7.62 by 25 cartridge based on the 7.63 25mm cartridge used by the German C-96 handgun. 2. The pistol had to be semi-automatic. 3. The handgun had to be reliable enough to function with little maintenance in the harsh conditions found on Russian battlefields. 4. The design had to be simple and use as few parts as possible. This was due to Soviet conscription of citizens who often could not read or write. As such, the gun needed to be simple enough for a soldier to repair in the field with minimal training, and ideally with no tools. 5. The pistol had to be designed for ease of mass production since the need for weapons in World War II was urgent. 6. The pistol had to be accurate at 25 meters. While it's hard to find the exact Soviet definition of what is considered accurate at that range, based on the PMM, aka the Makarov, design requirements that came afterwards, I would assume the accuracy requirement is the same at 15cm groups at 25 meters, or in American units, 6-inch groups at 27 yards. As to why, they never really specified, but if I had to guess, most vital organs on an adult human are roughly about 6 inches or the size of a closed fist. So this requirement makes a lot of sense because at that range, it is capable of landing a kill shot. 7. The design had to feed from a detachable box magazine capable of holding at least 7 rounds of ammunition. 8. The gun gained preference if it was a purely domestic design, because this limited reliance on foreign manufacturers who could be cut off in wartime. And 9. The new handgun also had to have a long service life before reliability or accuracy were negatively affected. Now, what's interesting is, despite the emphasis on domestic designs, many foreign handguns were considered during the competition, including the Mauser C96, the Parabellum 08, aka the Luger, and the FN High Power. While the prospect of a 7.62 by 25mm high power is extremely intriguing, ultimately that design was too expensive for the mass production needs of the vast Soviet military. In the end, what made the TT-30 and later the 33 the winner of this competition wasn't a single noteworthy feature, but the culmination of several that made it a particularly well-suited handgun to Soviet needs. In particular, the TT-33's all-steel, rugged construction, excellent reliability, low production cost, and solid accuracy. But the design was not without its flaws. So what's not to love? Well, the most problematic aspect of the TT-33's design is its lack of a manual safety. Yes, the gun has a half-cock setting, but even that can be dangerous to use in combat. It would be fairly easy to accidentally drop the weapon while trying to pull back the hammer with your shooting thumb, or in the rush of a firefight, forget to cock the hammer all the way back and be left with a dead trigger. Consequently, many Soviet soldiers kept their TT-33s in condition 0, aka hammer locked back on a loaded chamber. This led to multiple negligent discharges and subsequent casualties. This is also why the replacement for the TT-33, the PMM, aka the Makarov, was required to have a manual safety. Now, the other drawback of the design is one of ergonomics. The TT-33's grip angle is awkwardly upright, making the gun's natural point of aim far below where the shooter would expect it to be, unless they were heavily trained on that pistol. And it's not just hearsay. I've actually had a lot of shooters pick up one for the first time, and I said, try to snapshot that target without really thinking about it. And they'd raise the gun up and try to quickly shoot, and ultimately shoot 6 or 8 inches below the target, even at like 10 yards. Now, another aspect that I've heard historians state that was a significant drawback of the design was its trigger. While it's true that trigger weight is decently high, the trigger is a 1911 style 1, which means it's a straight back, consistent pressure, and consistent angle pull. And in my personal experience, I've actually hit bowling pins while standing at 75 yards using the gun's minuscule sights. But more on that shortly. Let's look at how Tokarev actually came to his design. The TT-33 bears more than a passing resemblance to the Colt 1903 pistol and the M1911. The trigger alone is very indicative of the fact that Soviet designers borrowed heavily from other designs. What do I mean? Well, only one other handgun uses the same unique trigger bow as the Tokarev, the 1911. But the borrowing doesn't stop there. The Tokarev also uses a barrel bushing to capture the recoil assembly and a swinging link to unlock the barrel from the slide, precisely the same as the 1911. What's interesting is Tokarev wasn't content to just copy various aspects of other designs. He actually improved them. For example, the TT-33's trigger/sear assembly is a single self-contained unit. This means that cleaning it, repairing it, or even replacing it is very easy and can be done with no tools. But enough technical details. My favorite part of the gun's design is the cartridge that it uses. While modernized versions of the gun are available in 9mm Parabellum, the original 7.62 by 25 is an incredible round. It shoots remarkably flat for a handgun round and makes one hell of an SMG cartridge. Additionally, the Tokarev pistol is thin enough to reasonably conceal. This also means that it has a fairly small pistol grip overall, despite being decently long. What this does is shooters of all sizes can comfortably hold and manipulate the gun. Think of it as the anti-Glock. It's thin and heavy instead of wide and light. And speaking of Glocks, this may have been the Glock of its time in terms of reliability because it just runs and runs and runs. My personal Polish TT-33 has seen roughly 6,000 rounds of surplus ammo fired through it, and according to my notes on the old tins, the only malfunctions I've had, and there were 10 of them, were all caused by dead primers. That's pretty remarkable. Now, the only thing that prevents me from shooting this gun all the time is the current cost of ammunition. It's roughly 50 cents per round. Back when I got this Polish handgun, the ammo was around 9 cents a round. I bought 2-3 large cases of it to get free shipping and lamented that I had to spend so much money to get 5,000 rounds of ammo. Lesson learned. If you can afford ammo for your favorite surplus gun, buy as much as you can afford. It never gets cheaper. So what's my verdict? Well, overall, the Tokarev is one of my favorite handguns of World War II, and I think it's one that's grossly underestimated. Sure, everyone lusts for the iconic, sexy-looking designs of Germany, and they're great handguns. But if I had to take either a Luger or a Tokarev into combat, and there's nothing else, it wouldn't even be close. The Tokarev is a vastly more reliable, vastly more accurate handgun. It's kind of like a Soviet take on the 1911, but way more reliable. Now, some people will say, well, that's the Timu 1911, but to me, it's like a tougher, skinnier, kind of crazy sister of the 1911. The kind of rough around the edges lady that, for reasons you're afraid to ask, knows how to hotwire a car and make a shiv out of virtually anything. She may have resting crazy eyes and a deep love for hard liquor, but if you show up at 3 a.m. covered in blood, her first question won't be, "Are you okay? What'd you do?" It'll be, "Do I need to get a shovel?" And that's the kind of lady and gun I want by my side when things get thick. Thanks, guys. For Burst Review, I'm Jim Grant. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you guys on the flip side.